This program proudly brought to you by the Also Foundation, developing the lesbian and gay community for over 15 years.
Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Queer Zone. I'm Madeleine Swain, and on tonight's show we'll be looking at two very different forms of queer artistic expression. Later on we'll be profiling Pete Burns, that's the lead singer of Dead or Alive, and who is still alive in case you were wondering where he's been since the 80s. Well, John Richards was granted an interview with his royal eye patch and he'll tell us all about it a bit later, and we'll have some footage of that and some other footage of the unbearable Peteness of being. But first up, let's have a look at some of the highlights of Rapid Fire 2. Now, this was a presentation during the Fringe Festival in which local and international queer writers read from their work. It was proudly presented by Hares Hyenas bookshops and Screaming Hyena magazine, and Bent TV cameras were there to capture all the action. And here it is.
Hello, my name's Adam Richard. You have to excuse me if I'm a bit scattered because I didn't sleep very much last night. I had this nightmare that Felicity Kennett asked me to wax her bikini line. She wanted a map of Tassie turned into a map of Victoria so Jeff could take his work home with him. Again, I can't believe he didn't ring me. Again. I've told him I don't know how many times, and he'll be regular as clockwork for a few weeks, a couple of months even, then he'll stop, just like that. Sorry, Matthew, forgot. And you know what it's like when you're waiting for someone to call? You usually end up ringing them and they say, "Oh, I was just about to call you," which is complete bullshit because that's what I always say when I haven't rung someone, even if I haven't spoken to them for a couple of years. I still say it. "Oh, I was just about to call you." I've got this friend who calls me about once a year and I always say it, "Just about to call you." Then she tells me I must be telepathetic. Wish I was. Then I'd have known for sure why Jim hadn't called again. He's going to send me batty. He is. He demands I do things with him at the drop of a hat. Rings up and says, "Let's have lunch." Like I'm still on the dole. And we can just go running around Melbourne for hours on end. Let's go to the movies. Let's go to Pizza Hut. Let's go shopping at Target. Fucking Target. He's obsessed with Target. The thing is, he doesn't realise how hard it is for me. I mean, I feel obliged to do all of this stuff because I've known him for forever. Since I was in year 11 again, when I was doing my HSC. I failed that because of Jim. If night clubbing was on the syllabus, I'd probably be finishing my law degree by now. Straight A's in Peel etiquette and social climbing at 7th Heaven. An advanced certificate in teenie trade at 397. I think that might be where I met Jim actually. On one of my fortnightly birthdays. They used to give you a free bottle of champagne, so every couple of weeks I'd whip up a new fake ID in the school library. They cottoned on after 3 consecutive months of birthdays. Don't know why I bothered. It was only ever a cheap bottle of Methode Champenois. Tasted more like Metho Champenois. Jim used to love 397. Jim loved clubbing, full stop. It was his life. He'd have a PhD by now with the amount of research he's done. Probably want to do his thesis on Sydney clubs. I used to say that if he had his own TV show and at the end it should say, "When in Sydney, Jim chooses to stay at the taxi club until they throw him into the street." I'd tell him that cute PhD gag, if it wasn't for the fact he hasn't called again.
In Love's Lane, there's a signpost that says slow, just a few yards before the Murphy's Gateway. Locals thought this was a huge joke. Vic Rhodes must have heard about the Murphy sisters, they said. Anywhere else, girls like that would be locked up, but in South Gippsland, they ran their own pig farm. You had to feel sorry for them. Their old man, what a useless bastard he was, buggered off to Queensland with some tart who sold Tupperware. That was 12 years ago, not a word since. Now what kind of a bloke does that to his kids? And their mother dead too, poor little cows. No wonder they turned out, you know. Mrs. Joy Hazelwood had heard that story and countless others many times since she and her husband Jim moved into Love's Lane a month ago. Their farm was right next to the Murphys. "I'm going to call on those girls and see for myself," she informed Jim the first green morning in September. "You can't believe half what you hear in these country towns. People have small lives and small minds." Jim Hazelwood had heard the Murphy sisters screwed pigs, but he did not pass that on to his wife. He had also heard that Eunice Murphy was a deadly shot and did not care much for visitors. "Take the gun," he said as his wife got into the gorgeous gleaming Chevrolet he'd just finished restoring. "Oh, don't be ridiculous," Joy said. She had heard the Murphy sisters screwed each other, but she did not want to shock her husband with that kind of talk. Jim put their gun on the passenger seat anyway. "You never know," he said. "You might need to kill a snake or something." As she drove through the shadowed cypress toward the Murphys' gateway, Joy imagined herself approaching the homestead in a cloud of dust, like a sheriff riding into a Wild West town. 2 young women blocked the driveway, hair floating, shotguns poised. One of them blasted the hell out of the white wool tyres Jim was so proud of. What she really found was Sadie Murphy sitting on the veranda crooning to a piglet she was feeding with a baby's bottle. Joy parked the Chevy out front and got out, all smiles. "Hello, I'm Joy Hazelwood, your new neighbour." Sadie Murphy held up the piglet. "Want to hold my baby?" Joy took the squirming animal and made kissy noises. "Oh, she's lovely. What's her name?" "Liesl." "And what about you? What's your name?" "Sadie. Her name's Sadie." A sweat-stained woman appeared in the front doorway. Arms folded, she did not seem pleased to see Joy. "What do you want?" Joy offered her hand. "Oh, you must be Eunice." The woman stared. She had a shotgun slung over one shoulder. Joy was suddenly all jitters and babbling. "I'm Joy Hazelwood. My husband and I bought the place next door, so I thought I'd drop in and say hello." "Come to see the loonies?" Eunice asked. Joy wished she'd thought to bring some proof of her goodwill. A plate of scones, perhaps, or one of those gift pots of African violets. "Well, look," she stammered. "I'm new here, I don't know anyone, and it's been a big change for me coming from the city, and I'm feeling lonely. I was hoping that we might make friends." To her relief, Eunice took a step back and loosened her hold on the shotgun. "Oh, come in," she said. Joy returned the piglet to Sadie. It had weed a little on the nice new blouse she'd bought at Myers before the move. "Well, that'll teach me," she thought. Good clothes were pointless in the country, everyone had told her that. Eunice left the shotgun by the front door and led the way down an airless passage to a sitting room that smelled of pig manure. Joy perched on the cleanest armchair and inhaled through her mouth. So many questions sprang to mind. How could the social services have allowed this? Sadie must have been a mere child when their father disappeared, and how could they have expected teenaged Eunice to look after a retarded sister and run a pig farm? It was outrageous. Full of pity, she smiled at Sadie, who promptly lifted her dress to display a blood-stained towel fastened like a nappy with rusted safety pins. Eunice seemed unfazed by this social blunder. "Cup of tea?" she offered. "Well, yes, thank you." Joy hardly knew where to look. Had the Murphy sisters never heard of sanitary protection?
Here are the words laid bare for your attention. Here are the sounds of passion, the echoes of despair. I don't wield a pen like a knife, I bludgeon with a keyboard, and the shards of plastic shrapnel embedded in the wound can set off a cancer years later. All writers are vampires. We are not born, we're made. We are the strangely socialised. We feed off your lives, distilling your existence and pissing it out as fiction. We take your lives as viewed through the distorted lenses of our own misshapen experience, and infect them with our own emotions, poison them like butterflies and stretch them out, pinned down with raw syllables, impaled, punctuated, capitalised. I've been wanting to write something for a while, something that won't turn out to be shit when I reread it in the morning. A couple of weeks ago, I was in the public toilets at a station in the city, a certain grand Victorian edifice, and like everything else in the grand state of Victoria, there's a lot of shit going down underground. Disinfectant pooled in puddles on the rocky floor. Graffiti on the back of a toilet door. 17-year-old here most days, 4 to 4:30. Rank smell of urine in the air. Wet sounds, pissing, washing, dripping, flushing. Intricate liquid calendar marking out every day of our lives. Some lives are bleaker than others. He was wearing a blue baseball cap grimed to grey. His shoulder-length hair was a dirty blonde. His face was sallow, his eyes shifty, bitter, angry. A tense walk like a fighter or a dancer. He catches my eye as I walk to the urinal, shakes 2 or 3 times, a cock somewhere between tumescent and hard, snaps up his tracksuit pants and skulks past me. Pay me first $30. I only had $10 on me at the time. I told him I didn't need to pay for it, not now, maybe in a couple of years, and I left as 2 plainclothes cops came in. Jerked off over the memory of him that night. Been thinking about him. About them. Some of them 20 or older, but still thin enough, undernourished, still looking 15. Been thinking about the men who have sex with them. The men who pay to have sex with them. Invisible lives in the big city. They move all around us, unnoticed. Hunters and prey. Serial killers always look like the person next door. If you were a vampire living in Melbourne, there'd be an underclass of people ready and waiting for you to feed on them. You'd have to get dirty, it's true. Are you willing to get your knees grimy in search of inspiration? For the catalysing event to trigger your perfect story, how far down would you go? All writers are vampires.
And we'll have some more from Rapid Fire 2 after this break.
He sits and smokes and mopes, lonely as a K.D. Lang cliché. Let's call him Q. He's panicky. Music on, incense burning, herbal teas lined up, 20 minutes to get dressed, 35 minutes to the knock on the door. End result, chat, cuddle, or a kick in the balls. He's still in t-shirt and undies, trying not to sweat. He stares at the cellulite paint bubbles on the ceiling, shifts his thigh to erase those paper-cut white stretch marks that aren't supposed to happen until he's old, which at 26 he's not yet, despite what that shit-on manline said. He's trying, unsuccessfully, not to remember that it's been 7 months since he last had sex. A few weeks ago he'd been dumb enough to confide his little problem to his close friend Simon, the one with the fresh flesh fetish. And good old Simon nearly required mouth-to-mouth from the cute waiter right there in the middle of Blue Train. And when he got his breath back, he hissed incredulously across to Q, "You might as well be a lesbian." Now, I'd like to be able to say that, well, some of Q's best friends are lesbians, but I can't. Oh, he's had the occasional surreal conversation on the dance floor, but that was sponsored more by E and acid than by coalitionism or curiosity. He had once had lunch with someone mildly well-known who was on business card swapping terms with a few influential midsummer lesbians. Over the balsamic chat, he'd met a fatally femme Teflon Dyke icon called something Bridget or Claire or Madeleine or something, and well, she was a bit scary. Scary as in 2 parts infatuation to 3 parts awe. She was bigger and tougher and prettier and smarter and wittier than anyone else he'd ever met, and culture shock was never his strong point. So he went and bought himself some funkier clothes and a better haircut, and resolved to stay safely down the shallow end of the queer pool. But, you know, sometimes he admits to himself, as he looks at his collection of self-help books and meditation candles and thinks again about getting a big hairy dog and dusts his mental windowsill of lesbian myths and salves his constant craving for real conversation and genuine friends and honest intimacy, sometimes he thinks, maybe I'm a closet lesbian. Maybe I'm a first-class dyke in a second-rate poof. Of course, the real reason Q is sneakily remembering the onset of his sexual berry is to forget the final chapters of his last relationship, which ended in such tawdry, schlock, sex, shock, airport, trash novel circumstances that he felt like he was trapped in a 3-book contract with Justine Etler. Months of stale disgust. He dragged his dilapidated heart around behind him like a broken-down bike, from friend to acquaintance to psychologist, till quite suddenly everyone he knew seemed to be having the same problem with their answering machine. Yes, he's tried the personals. No one he knows takes them seriously. Everyone laughs at them. And when their hands are rubbed raw and their hearts have been shish kebabbed on loneliness, those same people give it a try because, well, maybe. You never know. And so you take a good, hard look at yourself naked in the mirror, and when you've stopped crying, you take your neuroses and you pack them down under pile driver marketing pressures till they're flat and square and can fit into 35 neatly labelled little boxes. And then you publish them. Still, Q had a personal ad that ran for 4.5 whole months, longer than most of his relationships, come to think of it. And every week he'd shudder. Sure, everyone knew it was him, right there, this 1-paragraph Rorschach test for all the sad, sick puppies out there. And oh, despite all your determined, sensible grown-upness, still there's that exquisite hopefulness and suspense as you wait for the replies that don't come or are never what you want. It's like being a little kid again in the back of a car, riding the brink of an earth-shattering sneeze, and after all the huffing and puffing, all you end up with is a hiccup and a mouthful of snot. And yeah, he's got a cardboard box full of videos, full of pneumatic fuck machines of cold Terminator perfection. All those fake brown bodies bent triple over a car or another primly pimple-free arse. And yes, they're fun for a few weeks, but the sad, silly truth is, it's the open, secret skin of real people, with sweat and fears and flaws and names. That's what he misses. And so, it comes to this. An escort. As he finishes dressing, he hopes he can remember the fake name he gave in the fake voice when he made the booking. There's that knock on the door. Deep breath, swings it open, and she stands there freeze-framed. But, you're a man. Yes, but can't we talk about it? 5 minutes of wheedling, and yes, okay, they could, at the kitchen table, respectably separate, wondering wryly about the concept of a postmodern lesbian male. We'll call her A. She has hair like an upturned pot of glossy India ink. She does something with a mouth that's less like a smile than cooperation with a dentist. A lets him do all the talking at first. She's silent like an STD clinic waiting room. He watches her hands intently, remembers reading somewhere that lesbians' hands are sexual organs. He talks about Judy Small and how women should be spelt, and this country guest house on organic farm somewhere that he once went to without realising they didn't let you smoke. A stifles a grin. He moves on to identity politics and community infighting and gender parity and affirmative action and lesbian parenting, struggling valiantly for a conversational safe space. His mind opening, clenching and closing again like a sea anemone. She sighs, teacher to brat, phys ed coach to that pudgy little kid who always comes second last but tries really, really hard. Lost in a shooting gallery of cardboard cutout stereotypes, they try to find an exit together. And they do. It's called touch. He's leaning round her to gingerly set the cup of chamomile tea down on the table when he brushes her right breast with his forearm. Well, it was an accident. He's not used to anything being there, all this extra superstructure. And by the time he sits down, they're locked in a quizzical stare, recalling how and why she's there. And suddenly, he's hoping she's not going to do what his therapist does and cheerfully call, "Time's up!" She doesn't. From the stereo comes, of course, Tidus harmonies, lapping the edges of their skin like aerated honey. And he's trembling and she's deep breathing. And she's wondering if she should and he's wondering if he could. And he's hoping surely now, not now, she won't say time's up. And she's hoping surely not now, don't say something stupid. And Q and A lean towards each other, easy as slipping under the quilt of sleep. And they're inching closer. And before you can say queer political allegory, they're lowering the blinds of their eyes and arching their necks, cat in summer sun, and reaching out and... Oh look, 6 minutes. Time's up!
It hides in my bag like a cricket, little sentinel with its green eye blinking. I take it everywhere. Those in the know call the stub antenna a clitoris antenna. Women in cafes play with one another's, caressing the touchpad and showing off, saying things like, mine's smaller than yours. The instructions say you're not supposed to touch the clitoris when you're taking a call. And if a clitoris could make a sound, I think that would be it. 2 mobile phones at opposite ends of a cafe chirrup at one another like mating calls. Fleetingly once, twice, then the other like an echo, out of sync, another chirp or two, then silence, like when you step past one in its sensual hole in the ground and it goes quiet with negative anticipation. Silence, a place where you wouldn't put your fingers, a hole in the ground, damp in winter, and all with the voice of most exquisite beauty, the cracked brown-legged body of the singing insect. It used to set my I'd hear it throbbing through the stairwell, reverb like a gothic soundtrack. All round the grey concrete I'd hear it throbbing in the stairwell and my clit would tighten and sing back. I'd be alone in my car driving home, knowing the song continued, locked in that metal stairwell where the crickets came to shelter from the dripping earth. A wet finger sings round the rim of a wine glass, sings from or the lip of the cup downwards. The fingers quiver or the throat contracts with the tension. The passion releases slowly with the long-legged strokes of the bow. Wrapped in the dripping earth, my antennae trembling, there's a connection between the shrill of an Ericsson GH218 and the touch of your hand on my desperate thighs, the slip of fingers into the negative space, the black depths of invertebrate flesh. There was a girl who said, "Hey, I think we'll have mobile phones one day and really important jobs," while I stood beside her in a bottle shop buying cheap champagne with crickets in my underpants singing their hearts out. But she didn't hear them. She was just saying she thought she could hear one ringing somewhere. The crickets in my cottontails went quiet until she put her hand on my forehead and stroked it across a restaurant table, hooked her finger into the low neck of my t-shirt and watched the expression on my face shift helplessly. The sound of Joni Mitchell's voice in 1977, from crickets clicking in the ferns to the brown of my school uniform, the broad-brimmed straw hat of the first girl that gave me cicadas in my sports bloomers, so transfixed by her that my friends would indulgently lead me away backwards. I'd drama queen it so they knew I really must be a lesbian. I acted tortured in a big way to hide the fact that I was. The sound of an opera singer's shimmering downpour, and I'm ensconced again in the thick folds of her dress and the dripping wall of her desire. She opens her throat and we all know what emerges. Deceit and loss cry out beyond reason, and sitting beside me in the theatre is an elegant woman who's turned her phone down before she came in, so there's no excuse for mating calls. And so I sit quietly amid the red velvet and rely on the contralto to make the sound for me, her reverberating voice rimming the wineglass of my incorrigible want. I watch her heavy dress turn tremolo blue to death grey as she plummets from a castle top. Cicadas spend most of their lives underground and sightless, surfacing only when they mate. They hang out in the trees for 2 weeks out of their whole lives and fuck like crazy and sing their hearts out. And what about the time I finally couldn't bear the sense of singing blindly with leathery, feathery forewings rubbing wildly alone? I squirmed around in my hole with my stub antenna throbbing, rubbing my head with my forelegs like the shrilling was a headache. Uncomfortable as a small object thrust into a crack in the damp wall, I stuck there. My phone started ringing while I sat on a park bench, agonising my way round your denial. You sat there smoking and stretched your arm along the seat, realised I was there and pulled it back. You said, "Aren't you going to answer it?" And I said, "Let it ring."
I'm a Canadian writer, but I live in Greece and I'm kind of homesick, so I would like to read a Greek poem. I live on Lesbos, actually. And this is Vula. Vula is the title of this poem. And there's one thing I should probably tell you about it. There's a kind of dance in Greece called rebetika. And it's a beautiful, very passionate, hypnotic kind of dance. And traditionally it's performed only by men. But Vula, who is a woman, is a very, very good rebetika dancer. Rebetika started in the 1930s and 40s as a kind of music and dance of protest. It's a dance that's a lot like gypsy flamenco. Social outcasts embrace this music. And I sing a little bit of it before I read this poem. Θα βάλω στο μαντίλι σου 3 καλά του κόσμου, 3 καλά του κόσμου. Έθηκε και χάθηκε, χάθηκε σε στεριά, χάθηκε σε στεριά. Little spot is the meaning of my name. But look at me. I am Vula. My life is as big as the sun. She is ugly, they'll tell you. A dirty dog woman, a junkie, and a bitch covered in sores besides. But look at my young lovers, Technamu, Sonia from Brazil, Katerina from the north, Sinead from Ireland with all her silk and lace. I am Vula, I am famous. If you see me dance rebetiko, you too will love me. You will watch and look away with burning eyes. Even Vassos plates know the disorder of love. They leap off the tables to shatter just to touch my feet. With these scuffed boots, I sway hard and slow inside the music, my arms in the air, elbows crooked above my head. I am balancing each star high, high above the plane trees. I close my eyes to dance like this. You have to close your eyes to see inside the music, to see inside a woman, and to see inside the gods. The accordion and I breathe the warm night wind. The mandolin has my curves, the same thin hardness and dirty fingerprints all over her body. Sweat shines like oil on my forehead. I dance so slowly, a snake without arms, without legs, held up by the taut nerves of the music. I have given my limbs to you. I have given my eyes to you. I am naked in this dance, in this night, beneath the plane trees. Nazis Hilyachronia, Nazis Panda. May you live 1,000 years. May you live forever. Thank you.
And you can find works from the writers featured in Rapid Fire 2 in Hares Hyenas bookshops in South Yarra and Fitzroy. Now, from the sublime to the ridiculous. Dead or Alive came to town quite recently, and judging from the public reaction, you'd have thought the 80s had never ended. Pete Burns is still the gender-bending pop god that he ever was, and our John Richards managed to snag an interview with him. So, sit back, whack on a bit more white pan and some black eyeliner, and enjoy some random moments with Pete Burns.
Like a record, baby. You know, there comes a time for every boy when his life is changed forever, when he gets the call. Now, I had the call recently. It came from Brendan from Sony Publicity, who said, did we want to interview Pete Burns? And I said, the Pete Burns? I said, the Dead or Alive Pete Burns? The 80s icon gender-bending you spin me round Pete Burns? And they said, yeah, that's the one. We went, all right then. But before we do, let's ask the people on the street what they think of Pete.
So Lorraine, what's your opinion on Pete Burns?
He's very glamorous, very glamorous. I don't like his music that much, but I like his makeup and his hair.
Pete Burns. Oh, Dead or Alive? I've heard actually nothing about him. I read an article about him in Beat magazine the other day. Sort of found out what he was doing, what he's done, stuff like that. Sounds interesting.
Well, I just remember, like in the 80s, long tresses of hair and dancing like this and singing lots of silly songs.
Pete Burns is, he's from a long time ago. He's alright. I don't know what he's doing now.
I think he's a great artist. I love, like, gender-bending freaks like him and stuff that aren't afraid to get up and get into, like, tight leotards and prance around in high heels. It's great. Freak everybody out.
I was more into sort of punk and ska, new wave, that sort of thing. So it was a bit disco for me.
So you've never heard any Dead or Alive tunes?
Probably, but what did he do? You Spin Me Right Round? I remember that one. That's the only one that rings a bell. Which I quite like. It's a bit too 80s pop for me though. I prefer 80s Nick Cave.
Yeah, I've got the Monkey Bubble mix of Love Come Back, I think it's called. Yeah. Good song. I wasn't a big fan. I never went and bought all the records and stuff.
Not like a die-hard fan, but I did like them. I would always get up and dance when they came on.
If it was Nick Cave or someone like that, then I would.
Which just goes to show that Smith Street waiters prefer Nick Cave to Pete Burns, as if that's any kind of surprise. But what of the man himself? Well, we caught up with him at Virgin Mary's in Paran and asked him a bunch of questions, one after the other.
well, what would you want to know about the album?
What's it called?
It's called Nuclear Patra. It's got songs and tunes on that I sing. I'm constantly asked this question. I really don't know what to say about the album. It's just another album that I've made.
You didn't approach this with any different way that you would approach?
In a very slapdash fashion. Every album that we've ever done, we've approached in a very... We're not really orientated so much towards mainstream commercial success. Making an album or making records is a great job to do, but there comes a time that if your record is successful, where you have to say, stop, I want to go and do another one. Like with the case of Spin Me Round, was a hit now 11 years ago, and it's got to the point where I'm starting to feel like Judy Garland singing Over the Rainbow and seriously thinking of killing myself with diet pills, because I get tired of repetition, which makes it very difficult for record companies and things like that to work with me, because I'll only promote something for so long. I don't believe in milking something to the point of torture. But it is, we've done a new album. We recorded it about a year ago. We're doing separate deals in every territory around the world, because I don't want to be with just one company, because if you piss one area off, then you've had it in every other area. So it's taken time for it to be released in different territories, and now the workload's coming at us.
I was surprised that Spin Me Round was the first single. Was that?
It wasn't anything. Yeah, it was the record company, and if that makes their job easy, I've got to admit that over the years I've made record companies want to kill me quite often. In one way I'm sad it's been reissued, because, well, if it had just been a reissue of the old mix, I would have felt that I was conning people, but because it's been re-recorded and remixed, it's not so bad, and people seem to still want it, which is really very nice. I'm not complaining about that, but I do other things. No, I don't dislike the guy. I mean, Pete Waterman had very little to do with the production side of records anyway. He was just like the brand name on it. It was the two people who we worked with, Mike Stock and Matt Aiken, that I have the thing against. When we initially went to them to do our first album, which was Youthquake and You Spin Me Round, because in England, I don't know how it is in other territories, they have the idea that dance music or disco music is particularly aimed at the gay market, which from my point of view it isn't. It's just the music that I do. They have a very bad attitude towards the consumers of their music. I've never worked with such vile human beings in my entire life. Pete Waterman's a different case altogether. From a business point of view, I thought they were very, very greedy, and I do have a bone of contention about the fact that they, well, how can I explain it? They started to destroy the creative side of the music industry, and they started to write the songs and create the artist, etc., etc. And I think that is an unhealthy thing in the music industry, and I think it's responsible for a lot of the recession and smaller record sales worldwide for people, because on an international scale, it's very hard for people to take Jason Donovan seriously on any level. His records may have been okay. I thought they were shit. I mean, even Kylie's made good records. I've been reading interviews saying that I hated Kylie. I have nothing against Kylie whatsoever. I just don't like what she represented. And the fact that she's become supposedly a gay icon, I think that just shows how low the gay icon standard has slipped, really. The reason that we went to Stock Aitken Waterman in the first place was we already had that sound. We were already doing what people classify as high energy music and working in the wheels of the corporate industry. Before they will allow a band in the studio, you have to have a producer with you to make sure things are technically perfect. And I chose Stock Aitken Waterman because they'd done a Divine single that I particularly liked. I thought it was funny and it sounded like one of our songs. And I thought, well, because they've done it before, they'll make the recording process very easy and it'll be very, very quickly. And it all worked out really, really well, apart from the fact that when we went into them to work with them, they no longer wanted to make records for what they thought were a bunch of old pansies. You know, they didn't want to do it. They wanted to turn us into a rock group and stuff, and we had to fight to keep our sound that way. And once it was so successful, they decided, oh, we can get anyone in front of this. We can just use the same backing track. It's not as sour as it comes across. It's a business thing, and I wouldn't work with them ever again.
And we'll have more of Pete Burns after these messages.
Well, people keep telling me I am. I don't think in terms of gay, straight, or black or white. It's my upbringing. It's not something that's been politically heaped upon me. the world that I grew up in was a very different world than most people grow up in today, and nothing was wrong and everybody was the same. And now when I go out doing promotion work and, you know, doing interviews and stuff, people say, how do you feel about being a gay icon? Well, you know, how could I possibly say how I feel? It's just something that happens, and I don't really differentiate between gay, straight and black and white. You know, it's just one big mass of people to me.
So beautiful.
Well, people get a bit disappointed and they think that I'm sitting here in denial about things. I mean, my social life in England, and even when I travel, I don't go strictly to gay clubs, I go to mixed clubs. I don't like the ghettoization of the gay community. It's not an ideal world, and I don't understand the political ramifications of it. I know that in London, England, there is almost a gay ghetto, which is the Soho area, and it's probably the best area that there is in London, but it makes me a little bit sad that it's not more mixed. I don't know where the fault lies. Is it on the side of the gay community or the heterosexual community? I really don't know where the fault lies, but there's not enough mixing in England. I don't know about here. My sexuality and stuff like that, I mean, you can't judge a book by its cover, and I go whatever way the wind blows me. And the whole labelling thing, I've got to think of a much more intellectual way of answering this. It's not a question that I spend time thinking about, because to me it was never an issue. Never an issue. I'm happily married. Obviously I've, you know, experienced both sides of the coin. I have no problem. Obviously people who are, a lot of people have a lot more problems than I do. I'm just very, very lucky.
This man is a Pete Burns fan and would prefer his identity to remain anonymous. We shall refer to him simply as Rosa LeVie.
Well, my fascination for Pete Burns probably goes back into the mid-80s, and I think Pete was a lot more sexier. He had a lot of sort of charismatic appeal, a lot more than people like, say, Boy George, who was also around at the same time. I mean, Boy was something that could sort of take home and show to mother, whereas I think Pete had a lot more attitude.
And so when did you start collecting all this?
Probably I was around 13 or 14, back in the days of high school. Just avid reader of Smash Hits magazine.
And you've still got it here, which surprises me.
It's a bit sad, really, isn't it? But when you go to so much trouble to collect all this tat, I mean, even things from England, you sort of don't really want to throw them away, you're sort of kind of attached to them. Well, let's see, here's an very early article, and you can see that there used to be 4 members in the band. I mean, you can see them here. You've got sort of Pete here, looking like a cat, and then you've got Tim Lever. This one was Mike Percy, boldish sort of chap up the top, and this guy here, Steve Coy, he's apparently still in the band.
It's Steve and I, and whoever we choose to work with at the time. I don't want a rigid lineup, because I think that most people who are professional musicians suffer from what I call the greed factor. They want massive, massive commercial success. They'll do anything to get it. That's what they go into it for. If that happens to me, and it has happened before, that's just a bonus. That's not the main motivation. I'm not that passionate about being a professional musician. That's just something I do. I still haven't found the niche in life that everybody looks for, where you think, oh, I want to dedicate my entire life to doing this. Music's something I do at the moment. It's just a means to an end. I enjoy doing it, but working with other musicians who have spent all their life strumming away on a bass guitar, I feel that they become unhappy, and when I sense that unhappiness, I feel guilty, and when I feel guilty, I just think, piss off, go and do something else. And Steve's like the manager now, because I find it very difficult to work with ordinary managers, and he's also the producer and co-writer. It's better like that. We're just responsible for ourselves. We're not carrying anybody else's responsibilities. Just not ready for it. Well, I've got this idea now that anybody who's going to work in the music industry, because it's probably the toughest and straightest industry that you will work in. I mean, the media people and things aren't so narrow-minded, but largely the record company people I've dealt with, apart from my Australian record company, are all particularly twisted, bitter people, really old men who have strange attitudes. And I've forgotten the question. I just ramble. Oh God, I forgot the question. I always thought being in the music industry was about self-expression, and it appears to me that it's largely not self-expression. but I've been allowed more than most.
I liked him back then, but I didn't think much of him when he was at Sleaze. Just sort of walked around, arms up and stuff. I didn't think the performance was particularly inspiring.
We got there pretty early. He was supposed to come on at 12. Didn't come on until about 1:30. And then played a whole bunch of old songs and about 2 songs off the new CD. Probably played for maybe about 45 minutes. Wished it was longer, but he said that the floors in Australia weren't meant for high heels and he wanted to get off the stage before he fell into another hole.
I don't know, maybe my drugs hadn't kicked in or something, but it was a bit flat.
Well, you know, I came here and I was talking to a lot of the ordinary press, the ordinary media, and they were going, oh, do you know what, you let yourself in for sleazeball? People's attitude was as though I was going to be really shocked. All I can say about sleazeball is anything I saw at sleazeball I've seen before, because we have similar events in London all over the world. And all I can say about sleazeball is the audience was fantastic and the organisation was far superior to any event like that I've done before. The people who organised the staging, the whole thing was very, very organised. I didn't get a chance to see much of sleazeball. I did 2 numbers and then went home. You know, I looked at the club a little bit. It was great fun. I think it's a positive thing that people come together in that huge amount. You know, they all get together, they can let the hair down once in a while. I don't know how this country runs. It seems to me like that is a really, really big annual event. We have monthly things like that go on in London. And if that's a yearly event here, it's a necessary thing where people can express themselves and dress up and get ripped and fall over. Nobody gets hurt. There's nothing bad goes on there. So it was really, really good.
There's this one here which I always found rather sweet, sort of a friendship made in heaven, Heat Burns and Morrissey. And sort of some of the quotes are, if I hear Morrissey's down or depressed, well, when is Morrissey ever not down or depressed? I'll send him a bunch of flowers, he's anyone's for a whippin'. And Morrissey sent him 48 naked sailors. I'm not sure if he really did or not. I mean, it's sort of odd, really. They're an odd combination, and sometimes I wonder if they're still friends.
I'm still friends with Morrissey. I haven't fallen out or anything. I haven't seen him for about a year, or, you know, all my friends, I don't really keep that, I don't send postcards from the Edge or, you know, phone them up. I haven't seen him for a long time, and I have to say that I don't suppose I really want to anymore, not because of anything he's done or I've done. We've just got very, very little in common. I think Morrissey, I think he needs to live a life. He's afraid of having fun. And when I got to know him, and I got to know him really, really well, I realised he was somebody who was afraid of being happy, because a lot of his music is about his sadness and his isolation. And in order to maintain his creativity, he feels that he has to permanently perpetuate that lifestyle. And I don't feel sorry for him in a patronising way, but I think he needs to have a little bit of fun. I don't think he does have very much fun. And also he's very, very typecast by his fans. I don't know about in this country, but in England, you know, the vegetarian movement. And I know he craves a pair of leather jeans, but he realised that he couldn't possibly have them because his fans would turn against him. He became a spokesperson very, very early for his views, and he's very, very good at expressing his views, but now he's not allowed to change, and he has a lot of fear of changing, and his hardcore base abandoning him. He's just like anybody else. He lives an enforced life of misery, you know. So I've got no time for that. I mean, it's not as though terrible things have happened in his life. He's very successful, he's very talented, so I don't see that much area to be miserable in. And he just has to keep that way. So it's a bit like, you know, Fire and Ice, 2 completely different personalities. It was interesting getting to know somebody like that, but I'm glad that I'm not like him, and I'm sure he's glad he's not like me as well.
So we should be looking out for that album and duets then?
Well, there's something actually out that I've seen here. There's a bootleg album where I did a live performance with him at the Royal Albert Hall back in the 80s. I can't even remember what the song is, but no, there wouldn't be any duets. I've got no compulsion to duet with anybody.
So you wouldn't want to work with no musicians that inspire you?
No, I wish Margarita Brackatana would cover You Spin Me Round. She's my favourite musician. Oh, I'm desperate for her to do that.
This was their first album, Sophisticated Boom Boom, and sort of trademark hits, That's the Way I Like It, and I'd Do Anything. My favourite song, I think, was Wish You Were Here, Youthquake. This has got You Spin Me Right Round, Like a Record, and other songs such as Lover Come Back to Me, My Heart Goes Bang, Bang Bang Bang. This one was sort of when I started losing interest in the band a bit. Mad, Bad and Dangerous to Know. There's a couple of good songs on it. Sort of Something in My House was the first one that they released, and this one's got a pull-out sleeve with the other band members on it, and so on. Spin it around. And that was the three main albums, and then after that I think they released one called Nude.
Was that released here? Nobody bothered to tell me.
This is their new album, Nuclear Patra, and they actually got a remixed version of You Spin Me Right Round just for something different, and a copy I see, or a cover version of David Bowie's Rebel Rebel, and apparently I read somewhere that this was dedicated to Courtney Love, which I think is kind of sweet.
You know, I arrived at a hotel the other day and they go, you know, I heard you were dead. I mean, no, I'm very much alive. Well, there's going to be, you know, here we go, the salesman promoting. What's going to be in the future? There's going to be a greatest hits album, but it's not just going to be the songs from the 80s that are just put on a CD and sold. We're re-recording them at the moment and having remixes done, so they've got a new slant, and there'll be a tour to promote that, and that's as far as I really project into the future. I don't really look back to the past, and I don't project far into the future, and I can't say I live every day as it comes. I'm sort of a week at a time kind of gal.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Oh God, that was really easy. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to meet
You're welcome. Oh, it was great to meet you as well. Thanks a lot.
I still listen to some of there was a band that Pete was in before Dead or Alive called Nightmares in Wax, and they were just sort of back in the late 70s, and I still really like their music, and some of the early stuff of Dead or Alive, you know, sort of music to clean the house to, things like that.
As a musician and as a looker, I think he's fabulous. Yeah, I think he's great.
Nah, people that say like one thing is for a certain decade, that's nah. If you can keep it going, I say keep it going. I mean, there's no reason for him to stop. And it's better that he's kept going now, because all the people that were really fans of him in the 80s, just because it was in, aren't there, and it's just mostly the die-hard fans that really wanted to see him that turned up. So he's got more of a cult status going now, I'd say.
Good on him. You know, if the Pistols can do it, so could Pete. He probably does it better too.
So Pete Burns, man or myth? Well, he's a bit of both really. Nuclear Patra, the new Dead or Alive album, is out now, and you'll find it in all good record stores, and probably heaps of the crap ones as well. So till next time we meet, take care and drive carefully. Bye!
I think I was. Just like Pete, yeah.
And that's it for tonight's programme. As of next week, we'll be going back to episode 1 of Queer Zone, for those of you who came in late. And remember that Series 2 explodes onto your screens on January the 20th with a midsummer extravaganza. But until then, take care and love safely.
This program proudly brought to you by the Also Foundation, developing the lesbian and gay community for over 15 years.